Good morning, Year 11, and welcome today to your screencast for the health topic. Today we're going to look at the timeline for the Renaissance period. So the Renaissance period is, as you'll see, the 1500s to 1750. And let's just start off by looking at what the word Renaissance means. So the Renaissance is a rebirth of Roman ideas such as science. And if we think of science, we think of exploration and experimentation. So what you'll see here is exploration and experimentation beginning to happen within medicine. Now, what's really important here is a lot of people think that it's a rebirth of ideas from the medieval time, but it's not. And if I'm going to draw a diagram, this is what it would look like. So if we write down the Christian world here, we have then three periods. We have the ancient period, where Christianity just starts to take over. We have the medieval, and then we have the Renaissance. And in the Christian world, in the ancient period, there is exploration allowed and experimentation. In medieval, in Christian world, there is no exploration allowed. But in the Renaissance, there is a rebirth of exploration. So that rebirth comes from the ancient period, okay, where they were allowed to explore, where they were allowed to experiment. So let's start by looking at the kind of first thing on our timeline, which is in the 1500s. So by the 1500s, there was the printing press that was created. So instead of writing things out, there's the printing press, which aided the spread of ideas. We then also have quacks, which were doctors going around saying they had cure-alls, which is obviously not very good in terms of disease. With regards to public health then, in 1530, Henry VIII closed monasteries, which obviously had a massive impact in terms of looking after the sick and poor in the Christian world, but then he became a patron of a hospital himself. We then look at some key individuals who start to appear in terms of surgery. We've got Vesalius, who finds out about the human anatomy. The human anatomy wasn't the same as an animal's. And we then have Paré as well, who also proves Galen wrong. Vesalius proves Galen wrong. We then have Paré, who goes on to find ways to stop blood loss through his ligatures, stop pain through his cream, and creation of prosthetics. We then look at about 40 years later, we've got the rise of Queen Elizabeth I, who, just like Henry VIII in terms of public health, uses patrons to build hospitals, so the nobility and the gentry. The microscope is created halfway through this period. However, it doesn't really come into effect until the industrial period, so you can link the microscope to the industrial period as well. We then have William Harvey, who really focused on heart dissection, so cutting into the heart to understand it. And he found out that the heart made blood circulate, proving Galen wrong about the heart. And then around 30 years later, we've got the Great Plague, which again showed that there was no understanding of disease. There was limited or some understanding of prevention, such as quarantine, but there was no understanding of cure. We then have Thomas Sydenham, who is actually a really quite important individual. He writes a book called Medical Observations. And this it was used by all doctors in England. And medical observations said a couple of things. It said move away from the four humours and cure and care. So this is really, really significant because it, moves away from, got to move away from Galen. We've got to move towards curing, not just, looking after people and thinking God will cure by himself. We have the example of King Charles II dying just around 10 years later, where they used old cures such as the four humours, but they also used new cures such as 58 drugs. But again, just because they're using new cures doesn't mean it's positive. They're using 58 drugs on one person. It shows again they do not understand medicine. And then finally, we've got Hunter, who finds out how to tie off blood vessels to stop a tumour from growing, basically saving someone's leg. So if we zoom out and we look at the Renaissance period as a whole, we can definitely see a rebirth in science, which has a massive positive impact. And if we focus first of all on surgery, because Renaissance, heavily we can see improvements in surgery. We've got massive improvements with Vesalius and understanding the human body, massive understanding of pain and how to stop blood loss, understanding of the heart, and understanding of how to stop tumours. So we can see surgery massively improving here. What we can't really see is a massive improvement in disease. If we track disease through the Renaissance period, we can kind of see, cure-alls, not really effective. In terms of exploration then, I just forgot to add that, they did bring back some, for example, bark from a tree in South America, which stopped malaria. The microscope was created, but we're not seeing massive positive cures sort of come in, and we can see that here with no understanding of cures and the fact that Charles II wasn't saved correctly. I would say here it's more for disease, the understanding gets a little bit better, the understanding that the four humours was wrong, but there's no kind of uptake in the Renaissance period where disease gets a lot better. And in terms of public health then, it's pretty similar. It's hospitals continue to be built, and specific hospitals, but also it's more about the fact that ideas are kind of changing, move away from the four humours, what hospitals should be doing. So I'd definitely say for the Renaissance period, surgery is really important, but for those other themes, there's not as much progress as surgery. So again, what I've given you here is just a massive overview of the topic. This is not enough. You've got to be using your flashcards to look at each one of these topics, to know the knowledge and to think about the groups that impacted when developing medicine.